These children are third-generation members of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. They live with their families in Camp Nusa in Lanao del Sur, an area controlled by the rebels. Nurjana says she remembers how her relatives were murdered in front of her by government forces. She was 7 years old. Jacob said he and his family were always running away from fighting, so they never really had a permanent home. They all grew up not with toys, but with guns. The MILF is the largest armed group in Southeast Asia. It's fought the Philippine government for greater autonomy since the Moro Rebellion began decades ago. The rebel group was one of the armed groups listed by the United Nations as forcing under 18-year-olds to fight. After years of negotiations, commanders committed to protecting children from armed activities. The United Nations Children's Fund started negotiations with the rebel group years ago. The UN has identified children in more than 20 MILF base camps scattered across the Mindanao region. UNICEF says some of these children are not directly engaged in combat, but are at a great disadvantage because of their exposure to violence. Under this agreement, MILF has also promised to put a stop on the recruitment of children.
It's taken a lot of work, and it's really taken the leadership of MILF to say, this is what we're doing. This is now how MILF operates, and you have to follow this. Children are the most vulnerable. It can affect them for life, not only sort of physically, but also mentally and cognitively.
The MILF is not the only group recruiting child soldiers. Rights groups also accuse a Filipino communist armed group. The New People's Army doesn't admit the accusation. The UN says hundreds of Filipino children are fighting in far-flung villages, where government services and control are practically non-existent. Just like their parents and grandparents before them, the early years of childhood were lost because of the protracted war.
I want to be a police officer. I do not want to end up dead like other MILF fighters. I want to be able to ride a plane. I want to see the world.
These children say they remain hopeful. They dream of finishing their education, so they will not have to suffer the fate as their parents. Jamela, Alindogan, Jazeera, Camp Nusa in Lanao del Sur, Southern Philippines.